Welcome to Every Night is Game Night, where two busy dads get games to the table by any means necessary. Check us out, along with other great podcasts, at dicetowernetwork.com.
Every Night is Game Night, episode 128, How to Teach a Board Game in 13 Easy Steps, Part 1.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Every Night is Game Night. This is Anthony once again with Jason.
Yo, my peoples, what is up?
All right, guys, we have a special episode this week, and that we're not talking about any games. We're talking about
finally taking a break.
Yeah,
finally taking a break from all those games. we try to squeeze in a couple of reviews every episode, right, man?
Yeah, I think so. I feel like, whether I'm there or not, we're telling people whether they should buy something, right?
That's what it's all about, man. It's what it's all about.
That's what people want to know.
It's true.
I certainly listened. Well, no, I might have skipped the Arkham Horror episode a couple months back, but there's a few that I found interesting.
I'm like, this Arkham stuff, Anthony's going to listen to that whole hour, isn't he? Yeah!
I've almost been talked into Eldritch Horror a couple times because of how people describe it. I'm like, maybe I won't hate it, but Arkham Horror, you describe that, and I just I start to fall asleep. I'm like,
I think you're okay. Second edition, third edition, I think you're okay, man.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm out.
So we're not talking about games this time. What are we talking about?
We're talking about how to teach them.
Yes. So me and Anthony are basically designated game teachers for our definite groups, for our distinct groups. I think, being like media personalities and podcasters and just like general insane people when it comes to games and wanting to play the new stuff, it's just kind of like incumbent upon us to teach a lot of games, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at my game group not too long ago, people literally said, I never understand I can't even read half the titles of the things you bring in, and yet most of the time they're good, and it just means you get to teach me games that I'm going to go buy in a month or two. And I'm like, yeah, I'm glad I'm committing a service here.
We like to joke about it, but it's, teaching is a lot of fun, and we're going to keep on doing it. So, I mean, we've done a bunch of teaching, and at this point, I'm a pretty organized thinker over here. I've kind of crystallized my process for teaching. So what I did was I kind of put together a little schema, 13 steps to go through one by one in order to be able to teach games most effectively. Am I saying that this is the best way to teach a game? Not really. Anthony's going to deviate in some key areas, especially because of the games he teaches. But I think this will give you a good start if you either want to teach for a new group, or you want to demo, or if you're teaching games a lot with your particular group. Obviously, they're going to change depending on the audience, but I think these 13 steps are pretty useful for folks. All right. So anything else before we get going?
No. I mean, I think you said it in there that you are much more organized than I am. So I may not necessarily have specific thoughts for some of these steps, but I think in general, from what I remember last time we did this, most of the things you do, I do in some form or another. And then there are just certain areas, like for teaching Euros versus teaching a co-op or something, where it's going to be very different for, certain aspects. So I think we'll point those out for you guys as we get there.
Absolutely. But first, we are going to get to Liz with the Liz We Trust segment. Liz, tell us about another Kickstarter that you have been perusing lately.
Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I'm here to encourage your Every Night is Game Night acquisition disorder. Today I want to talk about Coloma, a Euro game set during the gold rush of 1848. You'll be playing a pioneer who is seeking a fortune in the Wild West, and you can choose to do that by prospecting for gold, building up the town, hiring workers, and more. Mechanically, the game combines action selection, resource management, and engine building. What's most significant about this game for solo players, however, is that it has a solo mode designed by David Turtzi of Anachrony, Teotihuacan, and Dice Settlers fame. That alone is enough to get my attention, and if it gets yours too, check out Coloma on Kickstarter. Happy gaming!
All right. Thank you very much, Liz, for yet another Kickstarter segment. 2019 seems to be like this big, heavy load of Kickstarters. So many projects. We can only kind of skim off the top and give you, one per week. Otherwise, this would be the Kickstarter show, which we're not doing that.
Nope.
But anyway, thanks a lot. So let's get on to teaching some games. But before we get on to the actual steps themselves, I thought it'd be fun to kind of talk about what not to do, because I think that stands out. Like whenever you talk about teaching games, you're going to get that, ugh. And then all sorts of people are going to have stories about, times where teachers kind of failed and stuff. So how do teachers fail? Like what is a bad teacher? And I find that they kind of get grouped into two general categories. One is the too much information, and the other is like not too little information, but like it's very scattered. So like maybe they're, one person was just basically just like read straight from the rule book. It's like, okay, here, boom, 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 and like pour information to you like you're a receptacle and they're pouring water into you. And then the other is that on the other end of it, they'll like, just kind of like mention random stuff. Like they'll tell you about this victory condition and they'll tell you about this enemy, and they don't like organize it. So that I see that as kind of the two poles of terrible teachers. I imagine that you have some particular experiences that you're thinking of.
Yeah. I mean, it's especially because I play heavier games, so it's fairly frequent. What happens is people come in and they're like, well, I've looked over the rulebook a little bit, or I watched a video or two, but they don't really know how to play the game. And I'll get to how I address that on my end later, but you can tell, like, and they're immediately looking through the rules and they're like referencing, like, this is the order of play. And if they read anything out of that book, you're like, get me out of here. Like, this is going to be a waste of time. And when you're looking at a 2 to 3 hour game and that's how it's being taught, you're adding an hour on top of that, plus whatever rules get missed. Whew, it's no good, man.
It's rough, man. It's rough. So, I put up a thread up in Board Game Revolution community, with, please share some of your experience with bad teachers. Of course, I got some entertaining, responses. I kind of grouped them into some general categories. So one is being taught rules wrong, which is something that happens, like you mentioned before, like they don't really know a game. Ryan O'Ryan mentions getting automatic stat boosts on locations during Eldritch Horror, which is basically you might as well not play. You might as well just have all the stats in the world and just roll all your dice. That's not going to work out. John Gianni apparently spent 4 hours learning and relearning viticulture.
What?
How do you mess that game up? Holy crap.
That's a 90-minute game. What are you talking about? Oh my gosh.
I can't. Speaking to the point about presenting information in a scattershot way, Brenna Langan says, my biggest complaint when someone is teaching me, I need organization. Quit bouncing all over the place and actually explain things in a logical order. Yes, we are. That is basically exactly what the point of the 13 steps is. Going to try to get you as logical in order as I can, but I definitely vibe with that. It's like, okay, I do not need to know the victory condition before I know what I'm even doing,
Yeah.
Let's see. So there is also the too much detail, going too slow. Oh my God, pronunciation. Masiek Stepinski says, people who go on to explain every single exception or card that changes the rules. It goes like this. On your turn, you could take 3 actions, unless you have X or Y. Then you take 4 actions or 5 actions. Oh, and you can't take the same one twice, unless you have that. Then you can take the same action twice. And then if someone plays this card, then everyone gets only 2 actions. Or if there's this event card, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Oh my God. Like, especially a game with a lot of cards, At the end of this, I'll probably do a sample teach of Terraforming Mars. Like, I hate it when people just explain every single card, or like, oh, when this comes out, or when this comes out. It's like, oh my God, let's just get the basics and go, man.
Yeah, what you need to do is teach people how to read the cards, and then just say, hey, there's 400 of them. You'll figure it out as you go. Like,
please have mercy on me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to explain all these cards. And then the last person was, this is Matthew Thomas. He says, the teacher that does the learn as you go thing. So they just kind of like, people don't give enough rules explanation because they worry about losing people's interest. So they give a 5-minute interview and they say, let's just learn as we go. And then what does that result in usually when somebody says, okay, let's just play?
They destroy everybody.
I was thinking more along the lines of like, then someone will say, okay, well, I didn't, they'll get mad because like, okay, you didn't explain how to do this thing. Then, So, okay. So that was the bad teachers part, but there's also another half of the learning experience, which is learners. You know, a teacher is only as good as the learners who are willing to kind of engage with the teach. So that's a little bit of an underrated part of teaching, like making sure you have good learners. All right. So I actually did this as a poll because these are a little bit more standard. What do you think was the number one bad behavior that a learner can do at a table that messes up a teach?
If it's not people playing with their phones, I don't even know what people are doing. Like
it's people
obviously phones. Yeah.
It's people on their phones. Yeah. That is 150 votes out of like 200 and counting.
Yeah, it drives me absolutely crazy. I will stop sometimes and just stare at that person and be like, "You ready?" And they're like, "Yeah, I'm good." I'm like, "Are you good? Do you understand what I'm saying?" Like, I don't even care if I'm being rude. I'm like, "Put the phone down."
Yeah, I mean, it's not just like that individual themselves. You're just kind of like saying to the entire table that this is not worth my time, you know? Yeah. And then they'll be like, you know, they'll do the phone thing and they're halfway through the teach. Then they'll like put the phone down and like introduce themselves. It's like, all right, I'm ready. It's like, all right, that's nice for you.
Yeah. You just missed half the rules and you're going to complain about it later. And then everybody at the table is going to be like, he said that.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Some other ones that got votes, the quote unquote backseat teacher, the person that knows the rules, like, okay, you know, you play out the game and then one other person knows the rules and then they're magnanimous. They say, oh, I'll let you teach the rules. They don't let you teach the rules.
No.
I think I remember last time you mentioned that you had somebody like that in your group that was like, they always had the rule book on them and they was kind of interjecting and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a couple guys that do this and one is a little bit worse than the other, in which I'll go through the rules and he'll generally stay quiet. But what he'll do is he'll pick up the rule book about 75% of the way through that and he'll start flipping through it. And then as we're playing, just point out little things like, well, I think this is supposed to be this, or I don't know about that. Like just little things. I'm like, okay, man. I mean, you don't trust me to teach the game. Why are you even sitting here? It's not. We're all learning together. It's not going to be perfect. It's fine.
Yeah, you know, like Pandemic's my favorite game. I've taught that game 1 billion times, and I'll go into my teach. I clearly have like a routine. You know, I'm not like a wallflower. We've done like over 120 episodes of this show. You guys know I'm not a wallflower, and you know, so I'm doing my thing. I'm obviously kind of about to charge up, and then so I'll say like, okay, you move here, you clear a cube, and then someone will leap in. Unless you have the medic, you can clear all 3 cubes. Like, oh. Stop. I just want to kill somebody. Yeah, and then the last one was kind of related, but like people who are a little bit over eager with the questions. So like people who kind of jump the gun, where you're explaining, you have your logical order, but then people will just kind of like fiddle with something and say, "Wait, what does this do?" Or "What about this?" And that's a tough one because you want to respect people's enthusiasm, but at the same time, you know, like, especially if they don't get that gentle nudge, like, okay, I'm getting to that, like, and they're just kind of like go anyway past your little gentle nudge. That's not great.
Yeah, no, it drives me crazy. And it's like when I'm teaching, I very consciously, repeatedly will say like, and here is the tableau of cards, and there's 6 different cards. I'll get to those in a minute, right? Because there's a logical flow that you want to make sure people understand. You know, the concept of the game, the theme, and how everything relates. These are the various mechanics. These are the things you do on your turn. And then I'll get to the specifics later. And inevitably, every single time, like in every single Euro that I teach, people are like, well, what's that? Why is that? What is that icon? What does that icon do? Or why is that icon different than that icon? I'm like, I'm going to get to it. Am I done yet? So, yeah.
You don't want them to be passive, but there's a limit, right? You know,
yeah.
Like, I mean, I would like, you know, if somebody reflects something, that's a cool thing to do. So like if I say something and then somebody like restate it in their own words. So, Anthony just taught us, Teotihuacan, which, you know, that's a very involved game. It's a simple game, but like worker placement, I find a very difficult teach because you really do have to explain all the spaces and what they do. So like, you know, he'll say, okay, this space does this and this space does this. And, you know, someone at the table will say, oh, so you get the wood and and that's how you build the pyramid, right? Like, that's cool because, you didn't interrupt the teacher. You didn't like question the knowledge of the teacher, but it kind of reflected the fact that you were still paying attention. Like, asking a lot of questions of stuff that hasn't been explained yet is the opposite of that. It is disrespecting what the teacher's trying to do. And, and for the sake of engagement, yeah, you kind of want to avoid that.
Yeah, for sure. And the cool thing about reflecting back and just being like, this is what I heard you say, is that correct? Is sometimes it's not correct, and that makes sure the teacher has a chance to clarify. Like, maybe they skipped over a spot or just didn't say it as clearly as they want to say it, especially with like a newer game. So those are good things. Jumping ahead, not a good thing. Also, it throws off the rhythm, and you're like, wait, what was I saying? It's not helpful for anybody.
Yeah. So, So, part of good teaching is being a good learner as well. And part of good teaching is knowing what is not good teaching. So we wanted to go through that whole song and dance. Hopefully you got at least entertainment out of that one, because everybody has those stories about, being at a table and the teach not going so well. So how do you make a teach go well? So we're going to run through at least my 13 steps. And they're not all applicable in all areas. And I'll kind of break that down in a second. So the very first step is personal prep. And that involves one of two things. It involves either get to know the game or manage the table expectations. So first one's obvious, like get to know the game, right? Anthony, we're both solo players, partly to learn games, like we want to get it down there because, we want to be able to kind of be prepared before we get into the teach. Anthony, you'll go a step ahead and you're like two-hand a game. That I'm not doing that. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's how I got into solo games. Is early on in the hobby, I would read the rule book, and I always ended up being the rule teacher because I would buy the games. I would read the rule book and come to the game, and and this is me and Chris and the other guys from the podcast from BGA, but we're just sitting down, and I'm like doing that thing where I'm not quite 100%, so I'm checking the book, or we mess up some rules, which is not good if you're going to go on a podcast and review a game, if you mess up all the rules. So what I started doing is just taking the game and learning it myself, reading through the rules at home, and then playing it as if I was three people. I always play with three. So that really helps with Euros to understand the flow of the game. It helps with the teaching, too, because then I better understand, like, well, this is kind of when the game starts to arc, and this is when you need to start building, and you really need to do this and this. You can't ignore this. I usually only do it once. If a game has a solo mode out of the box, sometimes I'll do it twice with the solo, too. But in general, it's super, super helpful because then I feel way more comfortable and confident taking this to the table and being like, here's how we play. I've read the rules. I've played the game. I skimmed back through the rules to make sure I didn't miss anything. We are good to go, and I have even some tips for how to get rolling, as if I'd already played the game once or twice. So that's not to say everybody should do that, but if you are teaching a heavier game or something with a lot of intricacies, it helps immensely.
Right. And it also helps immensely to give people a sense of how long it's going to be. We will get to that. Yeah. We will get to that in a second. That is a different step. So yes, I totally agree with that. Get to know the game. The other part of that is that isn't always possible. So some say that you're at a con, which we were just at a con. You just bought the hot new game. You got Root. God forbid. You got Root because they cleared that out pretty good when we were at PAX. And you want to play it, but nobody knows and you just got it. Or, you're just really excited to get to the table. That's something that you're going to want to give players a heads up on ahead of time and be really honest with it. Like, I don't know this, guys. Even if you just saw half a Rado video and you're going off of that, like just say that. I mean, I think people get into kind of a pride thing where it's like, oh, I know it, or, I got it. And like, just then why?
Yeah. Be honest. Actually at PAX, I taught 3 guys how to play Root, and it was like 10 o'clock at night. And they're like, let's play Root. And I was like, oh, I've played that. Like, oh, great, you can teach it. But it had been a few weeks since the last time I had played it. And so I needed to brush up on the rules a little bit myself. It's Root, right? It's a little more complicated than just a standard Euro or war game. So I made sure they understood. I'm like, I'm going to have to go through the rules a little bit. This is going to be a little bit slower of a teach. So, rather than hour and a half, 2 hours, we're probably looking at 3 hours, as long as you guys are good until 1. And everybody was fine with it. And somebody went and got food, which was a good thing to do while I was looking back through the rules. But I can't imagine they would have been too pleased if I was like, yeah, I could totally teach that. And then I spent an hour skimming through the rule book.
Right.
That wouldn't have been very fun for anybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that is definitely in terms of your personal prep. Either do personal prep or be honest about the lack of thereof.
Yeah.
Which is how to encapsulate that one. Okay, so then that's kind of like it's almost like a rule 0. So I'm just gonna label that 1. These next set of rules are definitely more for folks. Either you're at like a demo table and you're trying to like build the table, or maybe you're kind of, in a meetup or, Facebook group, and you're just kind of like advertising the game. Like, I think that's actually part of the teach itself, is kind of seeding the ground, making sure people are kind of aware of what they're about to play before they even sit down. So that even that is part of the teach, which is why I can expand it to 13 steps. That's how I got so big. So step 2, and this is especially for demos. Set the game up and let the game itself begin the work of teaching. Like, we're living in kind of a golden age of games where games are all like kind of nice. We don't have like these games with these washed out boards, and like you look at it, you can barely tell what's going on. We live in these world of like Everdell, where Everdell has the big giant tree and like a big plateau, a big tableau of cards right in it. So like, right away that it's what it is, and even like with the biggest Euro, like, you may not know the differences between all the Euros, but like if it's a big honking board with over 100 cubes, and they're organized in a certain way, and there's like a victory point track on the top, like that's already tells people that what they're in for. So like, make sure you kind of have that all laid out before you even say a word. And then as a part of that, don't just let them see it, let them kind of fiddle, like let them touch it, let them, like do this. Like if you're a person that doesn't like people touching games, then I kind of try to recommend letting go of that a little bit, so that, because people learn with their hands too, they learn with their whole 5 senses. So I don't know, like you're laying these big Euro games out. Do you mind if people are like, fiddling and stuff?
No, I've never really been that particular about stuff. There are some games that are expensive or hard to find, but in those cases, what I'll usually do is I'll sleeve cards or laminate or do something to make it clear, like, please be careful with this. But at the same time, I'm not going to be, like, no, you can't shuffle my cards. I know how to shuffle my cards. Or, no, you may not look through the rule book because you might bend it back. It's a game. It's meant to be played. It's meant to be handled. And if it gets played as much as I want them to be played, they're going to look like that regardless. So, right. No, I'm not too picky.
Yeah, I mean, well, there are like things like some people, like, I like when people ask, do you ruffle the shuffle or something? I do like that. That's kind of a nice bit of a way of indicating respect. And sometimes I'll even like give people a little task. So like, I haven't even started teaching, but then I'll say like, okay, here, you shuffle these cards. And, here, do me a favor and set these soldiers up, in this little reserve area or something like that. Even then, that counts, man. That's part of teaching. Don't like hoard that all to yourself and just like, unleash it upon the world when you're ready. So let's get to step 3. So, now, they've seen it, they've seen the game. What is the game? What is the quick elevator pitch? Like, what is that one line or one phrase that's going to kind of tell people what they're in for before so that they can make a decision, right? So, like most games, you can kind of like do it. Like, if you're playing King of Tokyo, it's like, okay, do you want to play like a Rock'em Sock'em dice roller? If you're playing, I don't know, big fantasy adventure, it's like, okay, do you want to engage in fantasy adventure or something like that? I know when it comes to Euros, it's a little bit more difficult because like you're not going to like, okay, do you want to be a hydroelectric engineer or something like that? But do you have a go-to phrase like that? Or is it just like, okay, here's another Euro?
It depends on the audience. Like most of the time, if I'm playing a medium or heavy Euro, it's with people who know those games. And so I will use a little bit of jargon. And I usually will I'll mention 3 things. I'll mention the mechanics that are in the game, because some people have very strong feelings about worker placement or card drafting or whatever. I'll mention a game or 2 that it's kind of similar to, and then I'll mention the weight and the length. And sometimes people look at me and they don't understand what some of that means, and I'm just like, if it's a heavier game, I'm like, this is probably not, if you want to play, I'm happy to teach you, but it's, it's longer, it's heavier, it's more complicated than some of the games you played. Another thing I'll do is I'll ask people, if there are people that I don't know in my group who are, coming for the first time, or if we're at a con or whatever, I'll ask them what they typically play. And I've played a lot of games, so I can usually pretty quickly tell from that if they're mentioning like Dominion, if I'm like, what kind of games do you play? Like Dominion and Carcassonne. I'm like, okay, cool. Not any of these. Let me pull out something a little bit lighter. Right. But in general, on the Euro side, it do kind of have to hit on those things because that's the stuff people care about, while also just confirming that people know what they're getting into.
You mentioned jargon. It's a pet peeve of mine when people kind of throw out jargon to muggles and they'll say, oh, this is a worker placement game. And the people have no idea. Or like a deck builder. Oh, you don't know what a deck builder is? Like really work on what, like especially if you're doing it to a wider audience, or even if you're doing it in your game group and you may have like someone, cause we'll do our game group at a game store. So we have new people that come in, and the new people, they come in and a lot of times they don't stay because, like, first of all, maybe everybody's into a game and they just get ignored. That's terrible. But even like when they come in and they want to play and they say, oh, I have this worker placement game. Like, come on, not everybody knows what that is, On the other side of that, though, if they do know it, then lean into the jargon as much as you can and use anything you want. Anthony mentioned a couple of good things. I'll also sometimes mention the designer. Like if this is a Lacerta that matters, or if this is, something that, Richard Garfield made Keyforge. Ooh, the guy who made Magic made this game. I'm going to play this, so that might be something to also look out for. All right. So that's kind of like, pitch. Basically, the elevator pitch is important. Make sure that you're aware of the audience, like Anthony said. Step 4 goes into another thing that my man was saying. Finalize the table with the basic specs of the game. And I'm talking about the game length, the game weight, the game theme, and what I'm calling the interaction style. The game length, don't lie.
Yeah.
Like if something, this drives me crazy when people are just like, oh, we'll bang this out in an hour. It's like, no, you won't. This is game. I'm looking at the game. It has all the bits. It has, player boards for every place. We're not getting this done with this in an hour. It's like, do you have like a rule of thumb for saying like how long a game is going to be, or do you just know it from experience? Yeah,
I try to avoid giving specific times because if you say like, oh, it's, 2 to 3 hours and you're just generalizing, that just means it's long, right? But to a lot of people, you said 2 to 3 hours. So as soon as it hits that 3 hour mark, if you're not done, they're like, the heck, man, you said 3 hours. So it's like,
yeah, I got to get home.
Yeah, no, like, people take it literally. So you really need to also take it literally. Some of my worst gaming experiences have been times when people did this to me. Like we sat down to play Eclipse once at 6:00 and the guys somebody else is like, you're not going to get that done because the place we're at closed at 11. And we didn't, but he was insistent we would get it done. Like, we did not get it done. And I was very upset. The Witcher adventure game is another one where they're like, yeah, you can play this in an hour or two. And we were maybe a third of the way.
Like every 10 episodes you mentioned The Witcher, you're traumatized by it.
It's so bad. And it's a 4 or 5 hour game. Like, it's not a 2 hour game. Like, you got to be honest. And if you're not sure, I don't know. Don't play it. Maybe I don't go home and play it again.
Yeah,
but yeah, don't lure people into a situation where they're going to feel guilty for leaving, but they need to leave.
Yeah, I mean, a good rule of thumb is if it says whatever on the box, like add 1.5 to that time. So like if a game says 60 minutes and say put it out there that it's 90, like you definitely want to overshoot, and so that way people are happy. It's like if you get it done in 60 minutes, like, oh wow, that was cool. As opposed to undershooting and then making people upset. You'd rather have people not play. Like, I know people get into it. It's like, okay, I want to fill my table. I want to play with people. You're just going to create a little bit more resentment if you're not honest with the time length. So be sure you're on that. The weight, if you're laying down a heavy Euro, or if you're laying down like a big looking game and it's actually very, very light, you might, basically like mention the weight if it's not apparent from the appearance that this is a whatever game. So like if you're laying down just a bunch of cards and it's like this big, like a thinky, like Race for the Galaxy, which is actually kind of a thinky game, you're gonna, like just warn people. It's like, there's only cards, but this is a little bit more heavier than you think. So set people's expectations up that way. Theme isn't that big a deal. Like, the game tells the story itself, unless the game has some mature themes, or like it's zombies or something that might be upsetting to people. like if like Anthony, we're both fathers, like if we come in with a game, come into like a cool looking game and all of a sudden like a big zombie pops out, like my daughter's not going to be happy about that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's important.
Yes.
It's important to communicate that kind of stuff because you never know like what people have issues with, what might be, a concern or a trigger or whatever in some cases. Just give people a rundown, even if it's a dry Euro, just like it's about, this time in the 17th century and these people are murdering these people. There's a lot of games about colonization and some people don't want to play those. And I understand that. And I don't want to play some of them depending on how they integrate the theme. Make sure people know what they're getting into.
Right. And then the last thing is what I call interaction style. So I don't go into the whole song and dance of what the game is. Like, obviously, we're just kind of going in the very, very kind of helicopter view of teaching a game. And we're being pretty thorough because I like to just make sure I have the right table composition before I even teach the game. So generally, I find that players tend to be in the mood for certain types of games. So like a direct combat game feels very different than an economic game or like strategy game, like with victory points. Anything with victory points, I kind of group in the same thing. It's like, so they all feel kind of the same. A cooperative game also feels very, very different. And then a party game or like a social game will feel different from that. So like there's 4 different interaction styles. Tends to be that if you like one and you expect one, and you get another, then you're not going to be happy. I can't tell you how many times, like, I'll go through a teach or somebody else will go to a teach and then they'll mention kind of at the end, oh, by the way, it's cooperative. And then people are like, ugh, cooperative law.
That's happened to me more than a few times. I'm like, it's one of those things I have to be in the mood for. And I'm just like, I'm not in the mood for this.
Like, why did you just tell me? Why wait? Yeah. Why hold that back to the end? It's like, that's a big deal. Like it's not something that is not something to kind of bury in the main part of the teach. Like you have to let people know ahead of time. And like, even like a victory points game versus like a directly competitive game, especially a directly competitive game with a lot of take that, like with a very sudden kind of, smash up style, a munchkin style, like, let people know if that can happen. If they don't like it, then let them make a decision for themselves. So that's something that's definitely something to look out for, even before they've sat down. So you're not a take that guy. When you hear that you're in for a take that game, what do you do?
I'm usually out. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that. I'll often ask how much take that. If there's a little bit, it's fine. But I don't even really like area control games if people can like remove my stuff from the map. So I like to know in advance. Yeah.
So we were talking about it before the call, actually, that, area control can be pretty passive. You do Scythe is a passive game. You're not going to like have mountains of, your troops wiped out or anything. But if you're playing like, Tyrants of the Underdark, remember that game, Tyrants of the Underdark? The D&D game?
Yeah, it was mean.
It's as mean as all get out. Like you can have like a bunch of troops and all of a sudden, 2 turns later, their deck has come together and like all of your troops are wiped out and you're at the corner of the board again. It's like, what happened?
You're like, this is not fun. What am I doing?
Everybody's fun is different. Just give people a sense of that ahead of time. And that will help you compose the table. Okay, so the tables together, or I'm talking in terms of like doing a demo, but it also works for your game group. I mean, you get a sense for who they are, but like you definitely want to like kind of prep your game group for a good time. So now what? They're all sitting down. They all have hopefully their phones are away, hopefully, and they're ready to learn. Now what do you do? So where I begin is what I like to call the verb of the game. So, games are activities. Every time you're doing something, every time there's like a main thing that you're always doing, or like a main 2 or 3 things. So that's something that you're going to want to do right away. So like, are you building something? Are you fighting? Are you bluffing? Are you cooperating? So like, sometimes a game will kind of encapsulate it with some sort of jargony terms, like a word replacement or a euro or a drafter or whatever it is. But like, whenever the jargon term fails you, I like to go back to, like the phrase, in this game, you are a blank and you're trying to do blank, So like, I mean, imagine like, for your style of game, it would be like you're trading or I don't know. What else do you do?
Build things.
Yeah, you're trading and you're building generally. So like, what do you think of that approach? Like, in terms of thinking about it in terms of like the verb of the game, like this is what you're doing and that's where you start.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think on the Euro side, it doesn't necessarily teach people as like if you're using that language, it's not necessarily telling them what the game plays like, but what it does is it helps frame it of like when you have those touch points, if you understand like in this game, you're a trader, in 17th century France, moving things up and down the river, right? It just helps people kind of place things. The board suddenly makes a little bit more sense. Because when you first sit down to any game, especially like a Euro game, the board usually looks like nonsense. It's just squares and dials and different places to put things all over the place, maybe a pile of cards somewhere. But once you start to like put that in context, it's easier for people to wrap their brains around it. And then they can start to see like, oh, I see what I'm going to be doing in this. I'm going to be moving a lot and doing that with cards or whatever it is. Right. So I think it does help a lot, regardless of the type of game.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony is a creative writing or has a creative writing background. I mean, think of this as the introductory paragraph of your teach. So you're kind of encapsulating all the main ideas in one easy to reference, or like easily distilled thing so that when you go into the guts of the teach, which is, the actions and the exceptions and the player powers and all that kind of stuff, you can always go back to that introduction, quote unquote, and make sense of it. So it's like, okay, you remember when I said that you're building stuff? Well, these are the actions that let you, and this is the buildings where you're going to be, doing your thing. Or you're bluffing, it's like, okay, why am I doing this again? Or should I just tell people that, that I'm the trader? I have this red card. It's like, no, keep that quiet. You're bluffing. This is a lying game or something like that. So I like to think of it as the verb of the game. I find that a more universal way of referring to it. Some people, and I'm definitely one of them, but I'm very conscious that I'm not the only, this is the only way to teach, will actually just get into the theme and say, in this game, you are a, 13th century trader and you're this, and this. Or, then they go into this kind of whole song and dance about, okay, like, I mean, some of the games it works, like in Terraforming Mars, like, okay, you are a science or you're a corporation and you first land on Mars and you're, trying to terraform the planet from dust to trees and ocean and stuff like that. Sometimes that's cool. Sometimes it's not. I like that. Anthony, I imagine, it depends on the game, right?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, it helps put it in context. And there are situations like Terraforming Mars, it makes perfect sense because thematically you do need to wrap your head around, like the first time you're playing that, these global objectives everybody can do, and the game doesn't end until we all do them. And so you need to understand, like, we're all working together towards a goal of terraforming the planet. You're just trying to get the most points in doing it. And that is part of the theme. And so telling people how that works is kind of important. But there are certain games where I'm just like, here's some cubes, here's some dudes, you move your dudes, you get some cubes, you pay the cubes, you finish the card, like, and people are fine with that if it's a simple enough game. You're like, I don't care what the theme is, it does not matter.
Yeah, you're not going to tell them the theme to like Yinch. There's no,
yeah, like the more abstract the game, or if it's just tacked on, you're like, clearly you are Marco Polo trading in the trading in Asia. That's all you need to know about the theme. Anyways, you're trying to get camels and you're trying to get these spices. And that's all you need to know.
Yeah, sometimes mentioning theme is good to get a laugh at the table, just to get things loose. But whether you talk about a theme or not in this kind of step, which step is this? This is step 5, the first step in actually teaching the basics of the game. You can teach the theme, you can not teach the theme, but I definitely think in terms of thinking about the basic verb of the game, like distill it down. Like, in this game, you're a blank and you're trying to do blank. Like that second part is the most important thing. To be able to communicate, you are doing blank, you are cooperating, you're bluffing, blah, 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 blah. All right, I'm going to cut it off right there. I know we're getting to the good stuff. We're getting to how to actually communicate mechanisms. What are some good strategies for laying things out in a logical manner? We're going to go through all that stuff in the next episode. Wanted to just kind of recap for this episode because I used to be a teacher. I still teach from time to time in different contexts, and I think that good pedagogy involves some review. So here's some review. Step 1 would be just the complete basics of, either prep the game or be honest about your lack of prep for the game. That kind of sets the expectation at the table to let people get off to a good start with it. The next couple of steps are more in terms of forming the table, making sure that people have enough information to decide whether they want to sit down at the game or not. So step 2 would be lay the game out, let people kind of ingest the game, either with their eyes or their hands or whatever it is. Step 3, that quick elevator pitch, what are you going to do to grab the player? Something very quick that summarizes the game. Step 4 is kind of filling in those essential details that people need to know in terms of making a decision. So the weight, the length, the theme, and the interaction style. And then we get into step 5. Step 5 is where the actual teaching begins. And as we were going over, I talked about it in terms of the phrase, in this game, you are a blank trying to do blank. Describe the verb of the game. Also, this is the place where if you want to describe the theme, you do it here, but definitely the actions of the game. After all, we are playing games. That's an activity. So that's the first thing you kind of want to get out there. And that'll get you off on a good start so that you can get to the rest of the stuff. All right. So if you enjoy what you are hearing so far, this is something a little bit different for us, this kind of episode where we're not reviewing a game. We're just kind of going off of our experience, a little bit of an explainer, so to speak. If you want us to do other episodes like this, if you enjoy what you're hearing, please hit us up, ENGN_podcast on the Twitter, Every Night is Game Night Facebook group, everynightisgamenight.com, which is our website. We also have a geek list over on Board Game Geek. I am user Pope Sixtus, so I'm always, people do send messages, and it's always awesome when people do. I try to respond as soon as I see it. It's good, I don't get that many. Not exactly Board Game Blitz over here, but do the best that we can. And if I see it, I will answer it. I will, try to chat as much as I can. I get a lot of energy from interacting with you guys, so it's really cool. If you want to do us a big favor, go ahead and rate us 5 stars or however many stars you think we deserve over on the iTunes store. Helps us bump up on those algorithms and all that kind of stuff. Don't understand how that works at all, but more ratings equals better. So that would be a really cool thing if you could do that. All right, we're going to see you next week. So until then, go ahead and grab a solo game off of that shelf and let's make every night a game night.